the definitive guide to unraveling the world of nonverbal communication. This comprehensive manual combines the wisdom of NLP, manipulation techniques, and dark psychology to empower you with the tools needed to navigate social interactions with finesse and influence.
Hello, this is Eric Holt, and you are listening to Decoding Body Language, Crack the Code of Human Behavior, Speed Read People Like a Book, and learn how to analyze people with NLP, manipulation, dark psychology, mind control, and persuasion skills, provided to you by United Audiobooks. I hope you enjoy my audiobook. Now, let us begin.
Introduction. Do you want to possess the ability to decode body language? Why do you think you need to study and learn body language and signals? Is being an expert in body language a really great skill to have? One skill that many people would like to harness is decoding body language. You may think that taking people's words at face value is fine, but doing so may only cause you to miss the bulk and essence of the message. By mastering body language, it will be easier for you to get and understand the whole message and determine if the person talking to you is truthful. By having a great understanding of body language, you also get the chance to communicate with pure intent. It is a quick way to establish connection and trust. Let's say, for example, you met someone for the first time. You can quickly detect their trustworthiness by looking at and observing their body language. The reason is that you can read their intent and control your own response using body language and cues. With that ability, you will be more effective in communicating. If you have no idea how to read and decode body language, don't worry. The entire process just involves mastering some basic concepts. With your knowledge in decoding and reading body language, you can improve your communication skills. You can also use it in improving your leadership skills and relationships. In addition, you can control your body language and use it to convey your messages more effectively. This skill also serves as your protection against deception, persuasion, and manipulation by those using dark psychology. If you are genuinely interested in learning and understanding everything about decoding body language, then this book will serve as your ultimate guide. It will teach you all the things that you have to learn about reading people's body language correctly. Upon learning the basics, you can start practicing and commit to really harnessing this skill. Sooner or later, you can see yourself as a master in reading and decoding body language. Let's start. Understanding body language. Hello and welcome. You grabbed a copy of this book because of your interest in body language and how to decode it. If you have heard about body language but you haven't done any real in-depth studying about the subject, it is highly recommended that you do. By gaining knowledge about body language and its benefits, you will feel more inspired to master it. What is body language? Every time you talk to someone, do you tend to take their words literally? Do you not suspect if there are instances when they are lying to you and actively manipulating you? Sorry if the last part scared you, but it is a possible scenario. Note that even simple talks may end up turning into a way for those around you to manipulate or use you. Body language is the part of communication that, even if unspoken, can reveal a true person's true emotions and motives. It can also make every message a lot more impactful. This means that communication is more than just the words shared between individuals. It is also possible to communicate through nonverbal cues, like body postures, tone of voice, and hand gestures, that all make up body language. One example of simple body language is a relaxed facial expression that suddenly bursts into a wide grin with eyes squinting slightly. Those are the signs of someone being genuinely happy. Body language can also be your hands flailing to signify exasperation. The signs can also be quite subtle, like crossed arms, to signify being defensive. Despite seeing the cues or signs, you are unsure of their real meaning. Note, though, that upon seeing the body language cues, it is highly likely for your body to react or respond to them instinctively. You may even do it unconsciously. In hindsight, you have also been using body language to influence others unconsciously. It is so powerful, but what is even more so is learning how to read it. Why does body language matter? Now that you got the gist of body language, let's start discussing why it is so important when you are communicating with an individual or a group. Let's talk about chimps, for instance. While they are wild animals, they are not mindless. Chimps live in groups and they communicate by using their own forms of body language and other nonverbal cues. This is true for other animals who are incapable of speaking. Despite not being able to speak, they can still deliver their message through body language. On the other hand, humans naturally have the ability to talk and speak. However, they still depend on and use body language to make them more effective in delivering their message. For instance, if you utilize positive body language when meeting with a group of people whom you don't know, you will be sending messages that you are approachable, nice, and open to learning new things. In addition, human beings naturally use their body language whenever they are communicating along with their words. For instance, if a person is going into a business deal or negotiation, their body language will show their confidence and commitment. A person's body language plays an integral role in serious interactions as it can show the other party just how committed they are to the conversation. Body language also affects how you present yourself to others, whether it is for a job interview or a casual meetup with your friends. This is also applicable during first dates. In that case, you may want to display your endearing and positive traits through body language. It could also be something that you do unconsciously. However, there are also instances when you are conscious about the effect of your body language on how others interpret your message. For example, if you consciously correct your posture, you can show someone that you pay close attention to them. It also indicates how focused you are on the things they are telling you. Meanwhile, if the speaker displays negative body language, you may reciprocate it with a loss of interest in the message being delivered to you. In addition, if the speaker is presenting important information, the audience will not perceive it as such if the speaker is giving off the wrong vibes. The science behind body language. Even before the first semblance of language came to the earth, body language has already been widely used. Prehistoric humans did not know how to communicate using words, so they needed to rely on nonverbal cues to talk to each other. They purportedly used body language to coordinate their groups whenever they hunted for their food. Certain nonverbal signals are considered universal. For instance, no matter where in the world you are, the locals will know that when you smile, you are showing happiness, enjoyment, or contentment. Smiling shows that you mean no harm. Even if you speak different languages, people know the meanings of certain body language cues. How come these nonverbal cues are universal? Despite some cultural differences, it is still possible to see similarities. Despite the fact that humans have varying ethnicities, there are still a lot of similarities, which explains the almost exact uses of body language. Some communication experts believe that around 7% of the real message of a person can be detected based on the actual words used when talking. Meanwhile, around 38% can solely derive it using the tone of voice. It is also very surprising to see that around 55% of the real meaning of a person's speech can be detected by observing facial expressions and body language. In other words, even if you talk to someone who has a different language, you can just observe their bodily cues to find out what they are telling you. Human beings instinctively use body language, especially in interacting with everything and everyone in their environment. Breaking away from this instinctual behavior can be difficult to do unless you undergo intensive training. Benefits of reading body language. To further convince you to get into learning how to read people's body language, here are some of the biggest benefits that you can receive if you become skilled in this area. Helps you learn how to connect with people. According to different studies, 60 to 90% of communications are done through nonverbal cues or body language. By learning everything about reading and decoding body language, connecting with people will be easier as your skills in this field will serve as your ultimate weapon. You can pick up the small gestures and changes in a person's voice to understand them much better, thereby making a stronger connection. Improves your business and negotiation skills. If you are an entrepreneur, you absolutely need to know how to read and use body language, regardless of what kind of business you're into. Your business may fail or succeed depending on how you can effectively recognize and adapt to people's body language. Let's say you have a meeting with a prospective client. Do not just focus solely on your pitch. It is also crucial to observe the response of your client. This will prevent you from missing out a couple of important body language cues, like crossed arms or when they are constantly looking at their watch. That may signify that they are no longer interested in what you were saying. If you had only seen these signs and interpreted them correctly, you would have made some adjustments on your pitch that would have helped you close the deal. By recognizing body language and the proper way of reciprocating it, you can gain positive results on your business deals and negotiations. Even new entrepreneurs have a high chance of getting great deals if they know how to communicate and interact with present and prospective clients. You can also use this knowledge to keep yourself from getting cheated. Helps you avoid conflicts. Human beings display certain types of body language whenever they are upset or angry. If you know how to identify these, you can do what is needed to avoid conflicts. If you notice your partner is starting to show defensive body language and nonverbal cues of anger, you can do something before it escalates. You can also use body language in preventing conflicts in the family, workplace, or among your friends. Increases your knowledge about your own body language. What sort of signals are you transmitting? How are you making others feel just by being there? Decoding body language also makes you more aware of the cues you transmit and how they affect others. For instance, let's say you have been rewatching the good seasons of Game of Thrones and then King Joffrey enters the scene. You start noticing that you instinctively crossed your arms. This is what's called nonverbal blocking. This is an almost automatic reaction of the human body whenever it encounters something that it dislikes. With your knowledge on body language, you can control your own since it is already clear to you what you are also demonstrating out there. You even have the option to use it in influencing your mood. Let's say, for instance, that you feel bad and upset. You just need to stand up, puff up your chest, and hold your head up high. Just striking this pose will make you feel better instantly. It is like you were embodying the headspace that you pretended to be in. By learning about body language and how it conveys emotions and feelings, you can use it to do the reverse on yourself. Provide a different perspective of the world. Learning body language and how to read people will be like when Morpheus asked Neo to choose between the red and blue pill in the Matrix. In this case, the red pill is you learning how to read body language. How come? Once you become an expert in body language, you may have a difficult time stopping yourself from using it. Reading people would almost become second nature to you. Your brain will constantly look for body language cues from the people you interact with and those whom you just see during your daily life. It could either be an advantage or a disadvantage for you. Fortunately, you will somewhat be able to judge people easily and find out who are the ones who truly have good intentions. Note, though, that by not exercising proper caution and allowing your biases to rule on your judgment and mind, it is highly likely that you will only witness their bad side. With that, be extra careful every time you decide to use this ability. You have to use it responsibly and not let your personal biases get you jaded at the rest of the world. Regardless of what you choose between the red and the blue pill, reading body language will let your brain work actively in finding what you prefer to see in people. Expect to be impressed with how much information and detail you can get and suddenly see. The downsides to learning how to read people's body language are only a few. In fact, the benefits vastly outweigh the drawbacks, so you should definitely at least try to learn it. Learning to identify and read human body language will change the way you view the world, and that is an understatement. Nonverbal cues and their meanings. Nonverbal cues are the essence of body language. This chapter will cover the different involuntary body movements and cues you should observe and watch out for in people so you can understand them better. You will also know the length of time needed to translate them. Unfortunately, This book is not big enough to list and discuss the total number of nonverbal cues of human body language, but it will definitely cover the basics. After learning the subtle signs that you should look for, you may think that they are actually quite obvious. In hindsight, though, you may not have been aware of these signals unless you studied them. To help you get started at learning body language cues, here are some signals to look for actively. Detecting and decoding micro-expressions. Micro-expressions refer to the minuscule facial movements that arise when people feel certain emotions. You have to search for these cues to find out what specific emotions people currently feel. In addition, some micro-expressions are completely involuntary, so you can use them anytime you want to validate if someone is being truthful or not. Joy. The micro-expression for joy may just be the most underrated of the different facial expressions. A smile is more complex than most people realize. There are literally dozens of different smiles. Each smile differs slightly in appearance and conveys slightly different messages. Happiness or enjoyment involves many different emotions, including relief, arousal, ecstasy, wonder, and compassion, among many other positive feelings. However, you can also smile due to a negative emotion, like when you experience Schadenfreude, German for feeling joy over someone else's misfortune. Obviously, happiness shows through smiling, which can often be defined by the corners of your mouth pointing upward. There is also a tendency for your cheeks to move up, causing the lower eyelids to lift. To ensure that a person's smile is authentic, look for the characteristic smile lines around the corners of the mouth and the eyes, crow's feet. These typically appear on the face when the smile is genuine. In addition, a genuine smile comes and goes at a natural pace. A fake one lingers on the face for an uncomfortably long time. It almost seems like the face looks frozen. Surprise. If you suddenly encounter an unexpected event, it will trigger your surprise micro-expression. Our brains are continuously imagining an image of the ideal environment, one where we feel completely safe and a place that is familiar to us. This is the reason why your brain is always trying to predict or guess what will happen to you. This is an evolutionary quirk that allows humans to always be ready to react to whatever happens. However, if something happens that is strikingly different from what is expected to happen, it will trigger the brain's surprise reaction, which is part of the flight or fight response. When you are surprised, your pupils will dilate and cause you to hyperfocus on the threat. Your heart rate may also rise significantly, which signifies your desire to escape the situation if needed. The facial expressions associated with the emotion of surprise include, but are not limited to, the following: slightly pulled up upper eyelids, jaw drops down all of a sudden, the mouth is agape, fast and rapid breathing. Sometimes, the facial expression associated with surprise looks like those linked with fear. However, with fear, you will see horizontal wrinkles across the forehead. Contempt. Of the 7 universal emotions, the only one that is asymmetrical is contempt. When you feel contempt, only one corner of the mouth pulls up, resembling a half smile. This is the reason why most people often confuse contempt with happiness, even though their meanings are quite different. Contempt is the feeling a person gets when they feel superior to another or when they don't simply show respect to the other. It is obviously so negative that it can hamper and ruin relationships. Therefore, you should prevent it from manifesting as much as possible. It is also the emotion shown by many who want to psychologically and physically distance themselves from someone. Contempt is never a productive emotion. It only hinders proper conversations and gets in the way of proper understanding and empathy toward them. Anger. Think of the last time when you felt really angry. What happened that triggered your anger? Typically, people feel anger whenever they are mistreated, threatened, or if something or someone keeps them from reaching their goal. This means that you can view anger as a natural response to environmental threats. Essentially, anger prevents human beings from being mistreated, injured, or even killed. Anger is a primal response to make potential threats back off and leave us human beings be. Whether it comes from a real or imaginary threat, anger heightens our senses and gets the adrenaline pumping. In most cases, one tends to display anger with their eyebrows pulled down at the center, their eyes bulging a bit, and their lower eyelids pulled upwards slightly. The lips are compressed slightly, forming a line, or they can also be spread a bit to expose the teeth. The last one resembles teeth clenching in animals. In fact, anger is not exclusive to humans. Many animal species also show displays of anger and aggression. Sadness. Sadness is the emotional reaction to emotional pain or in response to loss. You can feel sadness from small disappointments to severe grief. Loss can take on many forms, so there are many reasons why one feels sad. You can often detect sadness when the corners of a person's mouth droop down. The eyelids are also a bit relaxed, giving the eye sort of a triangular shape. The muscles in the chin are also slightly pulled up. Humans usually show sadness to signify their need for empathy and help. Fear. When speaking in evolutionary terms, fear is probably the oldest emotion that humans have developed. Fear was carried over from the primate ancestors of humans from millions of years ago to modern human beings. In fact, fear is one of the primary triggers of human beings' fight or flight response. The fight or flight response is when the body prepares to either flee from the threat or confront it. When this is engaged, expect an increase in the blood flow to your muscles. The breathing and heart rate get faster, and the adrenaline is just coursing through the veins. Fear lets people somehow foresee the possible dangers that might threaten their safety. This is the reason why you should not just simply ignore the feelings of fear. Regarding the facial expressions associated with it, you will notice that the upper eyelids are usually pulled up. This shows the white parts of the eyes above the iris. In addition, the eyebrows are often pulled upwards as well. This causes horizontal lines to appear across the forehead. The mouth might be either opened or closed, or it can also be stretched sideways. The micro-expressions linked to fear are often mistaken for surprise, especially if they occurred quickly. However, one way to tell them apart is when the surprised face looks a bit more relaxed. Disgust. People experience disgust whenever they encounter anything that is toxic, regardless if it is emotional, moral, or physically disgusting. From an evolutionary standpoint, people knew how to recognize disgust on others' faces in order to prevent them from getting poisoned or infected. The common response to disgust is to withdraw from the source. When someone is expressing disgust, the eyebrows are a bit lower, the nose is upturned and wrinkled, and the eyes are narrowed. It can also be characterized by a lifted upper lip, forming the two vertical lines from both sides of your nose to the corners of your mouth. One thing to keep in mind is that disgust can often be mistaken for anger, specifically when the micro-expressions appear quickly since both emotions have similar features. However, one way to tell them apart is the fact that anger is usually accompanied by head movements, while the head does not have that much. The hidden meanings behind gestures and posture. A person's movements and body gestures are some of the most obvious forms of body language. When someone is waving, pointing at something, using their fingers to represent numerical values, or showing approval or disagreement, all these gestures are easy to understand. However, you have to be careful as some hand gestures have different cultural meanings. Be careful when you flash a thumbs up or peace sign in other countries, as these might have different meanings than what they are used to. Here are some examples of the most common hand gestures and their usual meanings. Clenched fist. This can indicate anger or a sign of solidarity when held up high. A thumbs up or down. This is usually used to show approval or disapproval. The OK sign. This gesture is made by touching the thumb and index finger to form a circle, and the other three fingers extended. This sign can either be a symbol for OK or all right, but it can also be seen as a vulgar gesture in certain parts of the world. The V sign. This gesture is made by making a fist and extending the index finger and middle fingers to form the letter V. In most parts of the world, this sign means peace or declaring victory. However, in the UK and Australia, this gesture becomes vulgar when the palm is pointing inward. The position of the arms and legs. You can also convey nonverbal cues using your arms and legs. For instance, if you cross your arms, it indicates that you are defensive. When you are sitting down while crossing your legs and pointing them away from someone, you are saying that you are uncomfortable with and dislike the conversation. Another signal that you can convey with your arms and legs is to stand with them expanding around your sides. It is a good signal to convey if your goal is to appear larger and more imposing. One example is when planning to assert and show your dominance. On the other hand, you can place your hands close to your sides seemingly to make yourself look smaller. You can do this as a means of deflecting attention away from yourself. If you are analyzing someone's body language, you have to pay close attention to the signals conveyed by their arms and legs, including the following. Crossed arms. This typically indicates that someone is feeling defensive or closed off and not willing to listen to another's opinions at the moment. Standing with hands on the hips. In most cases, this shows that you feel in control of the conversation. This particular signal may also indicate aggressiveness. Clasping the hands together behind the back. You have to get more context for this gesture, which you can derive from the other body language cues. This gesture means that the person is feeling impatient, bored, or rather frustrated. Crossed legs. This can mean either feeling closed off or defensive. It may also be a subtle sign that the other person is asking for some privacy. Flailing hands and arms while speaking. People typically do this to put emphasis on the words they are speaking. You can often find people who use somewhat animated hand gestures when they are haggling or negotiating for a better deal. Posture. It is also possible to sense and detect the thoughts of a person if you observe closely how they carry and present themselves. In this case, you have to observe their posture and composure. Posture is the way people hold their bodies and their unique physical form overall. You can gather a lot of information about what and how a person is feeling, plus you can obtain hints about their personality. For example, sitting up straight signifies that you primarily focus on what someone is telling you and the things that happen around you. Meanwhile, if you hunch over, it will give the idea of indifference and boredom. When reading body language, pay close attention to or observe whether the other has an open or closed body posture. The open posture happens when they show most of their torso. This posture exudes confidence, being open to new ideas and friendliness. On the other hand, a closed posture usually consists of concealing the trunk of the body, hunching forward, and/or crossing the legs and arms. This posture indicates that one is wary of you and your intentions. It might also signify hostility and/or anxiety. Keeping personal space. Have you ever had someone stand so close to you that it feels really awkward? This is what we refer to as personal space. Imagine a bubble around your body. As long as nobody gets so close to you and the bubble does not burst, that is your personal space. The amount of personal space that you put between you and the person you are communicating with indicates body language. Experts say that there are 4 levels of personal space, namely, intimate. This level of personal space indicates that you have a close relationship and greater comfort towards the other person. The distance kept is between 6 to 18 inches. There's also instances when direct contact, like touching, hugging, and kissing on the cheeks, is allowed. Unless you have a deep relationship with the other, like a parent, spouse, or child, you won't be able to get this close to another. However, the occasional hug may happen. Personal. The personal distance is around 1.5 to 4 feet, and this is usually reserved for relatives or close friends. If a person keeps this amount of space between you both, then they are declaring that they consider you a good friend and that they can trust you. Social. This level or amount of distance kept between two persons is usually ideal for acquaintances. The distance kept is usually between 4 to 12 feet. You would usually keep this amount of distance from co-workers who you interact with just a couple of times a week but don't really consider close friends. Public. This is the amount of physical distance typically used between speakers and their audiences. Let's say that you are tasked to speak in class or deliver a presentation in the workplace. In that situation, you decided to put at least 12 feet of space between you and the person closest to you. The ideal personal space also depends on the culture of people you are talking to. Some cultures require more personal space than others. For instance, people from Latin American countries are quite comfortable getting close to each other. Meanwhile, those up in North America need considerably more space. Tips for faster body language reading. When you are reading one's body language, you rarely have more than enough time. When planning to analyze someone, you have to do it fast. That way, you can gather vital information before they begin sensing what you are doing. To help you become a more effective body language reader, here are a couple tips. Differentiate positive and negative body language. You need to learn and master how to differentiate the two. Essentially, all body language cues can be categorized into two. It could be positive or negative. Restudy the body language cues that you already know and compartmentalize them into either negative or positive cues. That way, you will already know where to place them once you see them later. Look at the big picture. Don't focus too much on one area. If the facial microexpressions say that the person is happy, don't jump to conclusions yet. You should confirm your suspicions by checking the other parts of body language, like posture and gestures. Focus on the eyes. To get a quick yet somewhat accurate read on someone's facial microexpressions, you should focus your attention on the eyes. It is easy to fake smiles, but expressions using the eyes are significantly more difficult. For instance, you will know that someone is genuinely and truly happy if you see crow's feet at the corner of their eyes. Mentioned are just a few of the possible body language cues that people can make. By gathering experience, you can discover the unique personalities of others and learn from them. However, even with just the examples mentioned above, you can still gather lots of usable information from people.
I hope you're enjoying my audiobook so far. It would be a pleasure if you could let me know how you're feeling about this audiobook in the comments section below. We would greatly appreciate it if you could also like this video and subscribe to United Audiobooks to have access to more best-selling audiobooks in the future. Also, please, if you are interested in getting more free audiobooks, please click the first link in the description below. Now, let's carry on with the next chapter.
Body Language and NLP. Is the main and only purpose for reading body languages only to tell what one feels at a certain time? The answer is no, as comprehensive knowledge about decoding body language has plenty of uses. Letting you know what a person feels exactly is just one of the many uses of learning how to read the nonverbal cues sent by those around you. Another area where you can use such knowledge is NLP, or the popular neuro-linguistic programming. What is NLP? Neuro-linguistic programming, which we will henceforth refer to as NLP, is a method of changing one's thoughts and behaviors in order for you to achieve your desired outcome. And by someone's thoughts, I mean they can be another person's or your own. NLP uses communication, behavioral, and perceptual techniques to make it easier to persuade those around you to change their way of thinking. It is useful in influencing their actions to a specific level. This technique was developed in the 1970s initially as a way to identify successful people's thought patterns and behaviors and then teach these to others who want to emulate their success. However, the developers of NLP did not anticipate that their system can actually address the diverse issues people face. What can you do with NLP? NLP is a big help for effective self-improvement. It can help you a lot in case you find yourself having poor self-confidence, self-awareness, and communication skills. In addition, NLP can purportedly be used to do the following: reprogram the mind to follow healthier habits, help change your viewpoint, change or remove bad behavior, learn new good behavior, help with the healing process due to mental trauma, help reduce anxiety and control phobias. NLP is also said to have the potential to act as a therapeutic tool for those who are suffering from mental health problems. including irrational fears, phobias, and anxiety. It can also supposedly help ease depression. How does NLP work? NLP works by detecting and then modifying a person's unconscious biases, or the limitations of the map of an individual's world. However, in a pinch, you can also use body language to study their behavior discreetly. One reminder regarding the use of any NLP technique is that you can't liken it to hypnotherapy. You will not be putting ideas in an unconscious person's head, but you will be discreetly changing their thoughts and in the process, their behavior too. For instance, one of the central features that define NLP is that people have biases toward one sensory system referred to as the Preferred Representational System, PRS. Trained therapists can figure out someone's PRS through their conversations. For instance, if one says, "I see your point," it may indicate that they have a visual PRS. Meanwhile, "I hear you," may mean that one has an auditory PRS. In NLP, a practitioner will be able to identify another person's PRS by reading their body language and then creating their therapeutic framework around the said information. How do you use body language with NLP? There are plenty of reasons why body language plays an integral role in NLP. One of the biggest uses of body language in NLP is to help build or break rapport with another person. Using your body language properly with NLP will make you an effective salesperson, help you improve your relationships, and promote ease in connecting with other people. Body language can help you make connections, and you can also use it to break them, often unintentionally. When it comes to rapport, 50 to 60% of the effort into making it comes from your physiology. A few examples are your posture when you sit, the position of your arms compared to your body, if your body tilts forward or back, whether you are sitting or dancing. In terms of your physiology, the following actions can occur. Match body language. You can subtly copy what the other person is doing. For example, you can touch your right earlobe once you notice the person you are communicating with touches their right earlobe too. If done enough times, the other may reciprocate what you are doing. Mirror body language. This is a bit more effective compared to matching the other person. By mimicking the movements of the other, though this time it can be likened to a mirror image, you can get a better response from the other. You will discover that after mirroring your subject a couple of times, they will mimic you back sooner than expected. Break rapport intentionally. There are instances when you just do not want anything to do with the person. During these moments, it is great to know how to break rapport just by using your body language. That way you can leave a conversation politely. How NLP can help you in real life. NLP combined with body language can be an extremely powerful tool if your goal is to influence those around you. However, it is important to reiterate the fact that NLP is totally different from hypnosis. It does not require you to implant anything into someone's mind. It just involves influencing the other. In some cases, you will have to persuade the other to improve the quality of their life. In addition, you can use NLP and body language to help yourself with whatever problems you might have. Here are a couple of things where NLP is useful and applicable. Controls your emotions. Once you are aware of the basics of reading emotional microexpressions, it is also highly likely for you to detect them whenever you experience them. Several are even left unaware that their feelings are starting to rule them. If you gain more knowledge about body language and how to decode it, you can immediately catch your feelings and emotions before they become too overwhelming that you will have a hard time controlling them. Upon catching yourself getting a bit too emotional, you can use NLP to help ensure that it will not happen again. You can use body language cues as triggers to start your NLP. By doing that, you can stop yourself or redirect your energy into something more productive. Improves your communication skills. Decoding body language makes you more aware of how others feel. Once you know that, you can easily adjust your tone and lessen the awkwardness and discomfort in a conversation. For instance, If there is an indication that the one you are talking to is already a bit angry at the middle of your talk, you can lighten the mood and make it more positive by dialing down your tone. After that, you can use NLP to program the other person subtly to influence them to side with what you are saying. For instance, upon noticing that the other feels threatened and starts to get angry, you can de-escalate the situation by using non-threatening body language and physical cues to train their behavior and reactions. This skill makes you a much better communicator because you will also be taking the other's emotions into account. You also have the option to use similar emotions to ensure that they appear more amicable based on your perspective. Allows you to make an instant connection. Why do you need to make instant connections? For entrepreneurs, this is an extremely vital skill since it is the key to networking in the business world rapidly. Through body language reading, you can detect a person's personality and maybe a bit of their behavior. Learning one's particular set of body language will make it easier for you to use NLP techniques to build rapport with the other. For instance, once you notice that the other person tries to strike a defensive post, you can mirror their body language in order to somewhat make them lower their guard. Continue mirroring, and you will be able to somehow connect to the other person in a much deeper manner. NLP techniques you can use every day. To further increase the fun and excitement of learning and decoding body language with the aid of NLP, here is a glimpse of the usual NLP techniques for daily application if you wish to make the quality of your life better. Reframing your emotions. This NLP technique is one you can use to change your negative emotions into positive ones instantly. In this case, you should be knowledgeable about micro-expressions for each feeling or emotion and identify those with several similarities. Let's say that you are currently experiencing stress or anxiety. It is possible to reframe the way you think by believing that what you are actually feeling is excitement. There is no need to believe exactly what you are telling yourself. The only thing you have to do is reframe your perception of your negative emotions. Anchoring yourself. When thinking of something, especially one that you think of hard enough, you can use your senses to feel it. For instance, upon thinking of your favorite food, let's say a burger from your favorite burger joint, you will first remember how it looks. Upon thinking about it deeper and harder, you can imagine the way it tastes and probably actually taste it in your mind. This premise is applicable every time you don't feel that positive. For instance, if you have a scheduled job interview and you feel extremely nervous, it is possible to trick your mind so you will appear more confident. You first need to work on your body language. First, you have to stand with both your feet apart. You should then puff your chest up, then lift your chin a bit. Do this for a couple of minutes, after which you will notice a sudden rise in your level of confidence. Hold that confident feeling in you, then create an anchor for it by pressing your left earlobe firmly. Once it is already your turn for the interview, close your eyes and press your left earlobe. The stimulus will trigger the confident feeling that you programmed into yourself, which allows you to have the confidence you need to handle the interview. Priming. This technique will delve a bit into the dark psychology region. The main reason is that this is a bit on the manipulation side. You can primarily use this technique in marketing and advertising. Priming involves using certain kinds of stimuli to condition a person's brain to think a certain way. For instance, when you are browsing through a selection of wines in a winery and the proprietors play French music, it will prime you into thinking that maybe you would like some French wine right about now. To use priming in real life, you must first plant the seed. For instance, if you wish your friends to watch the basketball game with you, you can plant the seed by reminding them about the event. You can say, "Hey, you remember last month when we went to watch the Bucks play?" Next, before your friend even gets a chance to analyze and criticize the memory you just triggered, you need to divert their attention immediately. This will cause a sort of amnesia in your friend's mind. Some of the things you can do include cracking an unrelated joke or changing the topic abruptly. You also have to change the tone of your voice to a different one compared to what you used when you planted the seed. Do this process again for several days, weeks, or months. Make sure that the frequency should depend on the magnitude of your request. In this case, since the basketball game is still upcoming, you can choose to complete the process in 1 to 2 weeks. Before the last push, inculcate a positive state of mind to the other party. You can do this quickly by mirroring your friend and then persuading them into a happier state. Present your idea by asking your body to watch the next home game of the Bucks with you. They would feel somewhat confused yet excited about what you proposed, and they would likely agree. Mentioned are just a couple of the most effective NLP techniques that are useful and applicable in real-life situations. Some of them might seem manipulative. It would be all right to use these techniques if you have no intention to put the other person in danger. However, you have to be discreet when using these techniques on others, especially if you just learned about them. The reason is that it will take practice before you can do these techniques almost flawlessly. Body language and dark psychology. Another way for you to utilize your new knowledge of reading body language is to integrate it with dark psychology techniques. Now, I know that you are still worried about using it first, especially if you are still wondering whether or not dark psychology techniques are ethical. Just basing your judgment on the name, you would think that dark psychology is inherently evil, but that is not necessarily the case. So what is dark psychology? When you hear dark psychology, the first thing that would probably come to your mind is that it is a system to manipulate people into doing things they do not like. However, despite being controversial, it is important to know that dark psychology is a tool, so it is neither inherently good nor evil. Yes, some use dark psychology for detestable acts, but many also use it positively. For instance, you can find a lot of therapists who use dark psychology techniques to help patients overcome trauma, phobias, and fear. There are also instances when police detectives use dark psychology to make crime suspects confess or at least get important information from them. In a nutshell, dark psychology is a set of manipulation and persuasion techniques that you can use in making others do what you want. While dark psychology is being used for nefarious purposes, it is also possible to utilize it to help others. With that said, you should strengthen your moral compass before you start taking advantage of such techniques. What is not dark psychology? Now let's discuss dark psychology a bit deeper. To give you a bit more background on the subject, let's talk about the misconceptions about it. Dark psychology is not hypnosis. Although you can get a semblance of control over your target, it is not at a level that most people think about hypnosis. In fact, actual hypnosis is not as incredible as TV shows and movies make them out to be. In addition, you have to choose your target carefully because not all people are susceptible to hypnosis. Meanwhile, you can use dark psychology on anyone, provided you are aware of the proper techniques. You can also figure out what to use by observing their body language to get all the important information you need to form your strategy. Dark psychology is not neuro-linguistic programming. You can use NLP techniques in conjunction with dark psychology, but NLP is not inherently manipulative. You can set trigger stimuli to make your target feel whatever emotions you want them to. You are not technically manipulating anyone when you use NLP, but you have no choice but to manipulate people when you are using dark psychology. Dark psychology will not turn you into a cultist. Although you can manipulate people without them knowing, you cannot turn them into brainwashed followers. Even though dark psychology is powerful, it is not enough to turn people into blind followers that you can order around to do anything. Unless a person is extremely gullible, they will always have a bit of their will to prevent total submission. In addition, even if you could brainwash people, it will only be extremely temporary. Eventually, your power over a person will dissipate. It will get even faster if they find out what you did to them. What's the role of body language in dark psychology? Just like with neuro-linguistic programming, body language also plays a huge role in dark psychology. If you want to get under the skin of people, you don't just use your words. You will need to bolster your efforts using body language. In dark psychology, there is an extensive use of body language. Many techniques require body language so you can subtly implant cues into your target. So how can you use body language for dark psychological tactics? Dark psychology has many applications in everyday life, and here are a few of them. Dark psychology in dating. It may sound unpleasant, but you can use dark psychology to improve your chances of dating success. You can apply it to make your dates more complacent about what you want to do sexually, among other things. In most cases, if the dark psychology user is a man, then he will be stringing his partner along with him but without committing to a real relationship. Some of the things that he can do would be lying about his plans for the future and pretending to want to settle down soon, but just not yet. In most cases, the dark psychology user would also cheat on his partner and vehemently lie about it. He may show signs of wanting to commit to a relationship, but without real intentions. Another technique dark psychology users use is called chameleon manipulation. This is when the person would put on a mask of being the ideal person instead of their true self. They would pretend that they have almost the same interests that their targets have. This would make them want to lower their guard, giving the manipulator an opening to use more manipulation tactics. Now, when the manipulator is a female, what she would usually do is make herself the prize for the man to fight for. She would make her target believe that he has a chance, but would then turn him down. However, she would not do it in such a brutal manner. She would frame the rejection to make it seem like the man still has a shot at getting her if he would only try harder. Her aim is to string him along as long as she can. She would make the man completely engrossed in her so that he would always provide her with all the attention and gifts that she wants. There is a promise of a relationship, but her only interests are superficial and would readily dump the man if he could no longer provide her with what she wants. In addition, since men are evolutionarily more inclined to want sex more than women, a female manipulator would typically use it as a reward to get what they want. They would also refuse sex as a form of punishment. Dark psychology for groups. If a manipulator was ever given the authority over a group of people, they would use dark psychology to keep them dependent on their leadership and decrease whatever authority and autonomy they have. They would increase their control and leverage over their group members' well-being. There are several dark psychology techniques that manipulative group leaders usually use on their members. Make mountains out of molehills. A manipulator would make the other members believe that the problem is so serious that it will take the group's full cooperation with the leader to solve. The manipulator would make it seem that neither the leader nor the members working alone will make any progress, even though it would be easy if they thought about it. Mock and discourage dissenting opinions. Cult leaders would actively seek out members who have contradicting opinions and/or beliefs. Any divergent voices will be labeled as deceitful, or if the leader would want to seem like they are empathetic, they would say that the individuals are just ignorant. They would ridicule dissenting thoughts so the other members would only believe the words coming from the leader. Create an imaginary enemy. Another dark psychology technique used by manipulative leaders is to fabricate a common enemy that is so big that the entire group needs to unite to defeat it. The manipulator would make the enemy so big and powerful that the members would believe that the only safe place for them is within the group. Dark psychology for business purposes. When you are using dark psychology within a company setting, you will essentially manipulate the employees into believing that they are part of something big, something that is such a big deal that they will need to sacrifice their individualities to help the company. The leader would make it seem that they are accepting input from the members, but they would only take the bare minimum of their contributions. Some of the things that manipulative leaders would often say include the following: "We're a team," or family. "We will win or lose together." "You all matter to us." "Together, we can change the world." These are some of the mottos that manipulative bosses would say to make the employees work in unfavorable conditions, accept salaries that are below what they deserve, and others, all in the name of working for the greater good. Having managers who have dark personality traits are often the unintentional effect of choosing people who somewhat match the typical characteristics of a good leader. If you are out looking for a job, steer clear of corporations with managers who tend to have dark personalities, as they are the ones who are more likely to use manipulative tactics. Also, avoid expecting that you can get help from their direct superiors, as the company itself handpicked them for the job. In each of these applications, body language played a huge role. For instance, in dating, people would use mirroring body language to build rapport. In the company setting, the manipulative person would read the room to get the emotions and mood of the attendees. If you find that the people are not reacting that well to what you are saying, you can use their body language to gauge their mood. Manipulation and persuasion for beginners. Now we have reached one of the most crucial parts of this book. You will now actually start learning how you can use body language and a bit of dark psychology to get the results you wanted from every interaction. You will be using manipulation and persuasion techniques, so expect to feel uncomfortable doing it at first because its nature involves dark psychology. Before we start learning about the techniques, let us first discuss what manipulation and persuasion are and how you can distinguish them. Although both persuasion and manipulation involve influencing other people, there are significant nuances between the two that make them stand apart from each other. What is persuasion? Persuasion refers to the process of making people do or believe in something that they would not typically do without another person influencing them. In most cases, when someone attempts to persuade or encourage you to believe or do something, their end goal is to give the two of you equal benefits. However, this does not mean you will look at things the other person is providing you as something beneficial. For instance, if a pastor or minister is trying to convince you to come to church, the intention is typically positive. You may end up getting offended, though, especially if you already have your own religion and are a strong believer of it. I'm not saying that persuasion cannot be used for negative purposes. The user will still be the one to determine the ultimate goal or purpose. People can persuade others to invest their money into ventures that they know full well are scams, among other things. What is manipulation? Unlike persuasion, which can be argued to be a neutral method, manipulation is without a doubt quite insidious. Even if you have noble intentions, you still manipulate a person into doing something that you want. With manipulation, you typically only have your intentions in mind. It could be to deceive, misinform, mislead, and victimize others. Even if the manipulator has a somewhat noble reason for the manipulation, it can leave a foul taste in the mouth of the target of the deception. On the other hand, those accused of being manipulators may also feel upset, as the ones who already caught their action may also perceive them as immoral and evil. Differences between persuasion and manipulation. Intention. The biggest difference between persuasion and manipulation is the intent. In general, people who apply persuasion tactics have one goal in the end. That is to provide a mutually beneficial result. This means both of you will be typically happy in the end. For example, if a salesperson approaches you, their main intention is to sell you something and gain a commission from it. You will also be receiving a product in return, which is the benefit you can get from the act. However, there are also those who use persuasion tactics for negative purposes. For example, if you try to convince someone to buy a product that is in reality useless. This is the reason why persuasion can neither be good nor bad. It is somewhat neutral. It will depend on the user what kinds of outcomes they want persuasion to produce. With manipulation, the results will always lean towards the person using the method. Even if the intentions are somewhat good, the methods used will always be insidious. Also, even though the intended outcome is mutually beneficial, The fact that you manipulated the other person towards achieving it leaves a bitter taste in the mouth of the other. So unlike persuasion, manipulation can never be truly beneficial for both parties involved. The target will always be victimized. However, you can tone down the negative effects and just do the minimum amount of manipulation as possible. Impact, result. The person at the receiving end of persuasion can gain positive results after the interaction. They may also face disappointment depending on the intent of the one doing the persuasion. This means that it has positive or negative results depending on the user. Meanwhile, if a person gets manipulated, there will always be a negative feeling linked to the outcome, whether the target of the manipulation gained a beneficial outcome or not. The fact that they were manipulated to reach the said outcome will always make the target feel violated. Trust. The trust between the user and the target will also differ. A person who used persuasion on another will usually still retain the trust they curried from the target. However, the trust between a person using manipulation techniques and their victim will always be tarnished in one way or another. Such is what happens when a person manipulates another using invasive and insidious means. Affiliation. People who typically use persuasion come from religious groups, but not necessarily from cult groups. Several members of different religious groups, as well as some atheists, utilize persuasion techniques to encourage and convince others to be one with them. On the other hand, a manipulative person does not usually have any affiliation. They usually just work for themselves. Those who use extreme manipulation techniques typically do not have any friends, especially once those around them find out what they have been doing. Their families also usually do not want anything to do with them, as manipulation techniques usually alienate the users from their inner social circles. Using a person's body language to influence them. There are many techniques used in dark psychology, but we will only be discussing the basic ones in this book. Still, the basic techniques you will learn here will be enough to help you as a beginner. Gaslighting. Gaslighting is an insidious technique that aims to manipulate a person by feeding them so much misinformation that they would gradually doubt themselves. When you gaslight someone, they would question their reality and even their own memories until such a point that they would totally believe whatever you, the manipulator, say. To gaslight a person, you have to build rapport with them first. Start with reading their body language and current mood. If the person shows signs of being defensive, you will need to read more into them to persuade them to bring down their guard gradually. For instance, if the other person has their hands and feet crossed, you need to copy their other body language cues while holding a light conversation. Once the person's defenses go down, you can begin with your gaslighting. Start lying about small and somewhat insignificant things and then move on to more serious things. For instance, when you find even a small disagreement between you two, you can begin to make the other doubt their side. You can bolster your manipulation by using the right body language and micro-expressions. In this case, you will have to use assertive and authoritative body language and posturing, as well as fake sincerity and excitement. You can also manipulate certain details in the local environment to confuse your target and make them doubt their beliefs. This can even make them doubt their own experiences. Passive aggression. You can also manipulate another person by faking passive-aggressive behavior. This technique is used to hurt and confuse the target deeply. Most people would have to deal with those who have passive-aggressive ways, like roommates who leave dirty dishes in the sink and coworkers who slack off, leaving you with the bulk of the work. Passive-aggressiveness is usually imminent when someone is angry but tries to conceal any obvious sign of having this negative emotion. However, their other actions, like stomping around the room, ignoring the target, and other things, make it seem like they are angry. These conflicting signals will leave the target confused as to what to do, making them more susceptible to manipulation. The target knows that arguing with someone who has passive-aggressive behavior will only make things worse, so they will be more amicable to your requests. When you are using this technique, you only have to show subtle body language for anger. For instance, if you interact or talk to your target, you have to avoid meeting their gaze. It also helps to respond by using only single words or just guttural sounds. Also, give the target glimpses of anger micro-expressions. A quick half-second of furrowed eyebrows every now and then should be enough to keep your target on their toes. Keep an eye out for changes in your target's body language. If they are showing signs of confusion and anger, you can increase your passive-aggressive behavior until they eventually cave. Cognitive distortions. This refers to a technique where you will make your target's thought patterns so distorted that they would believe that they have no other choice than to believe in what you say. This technique makes use of irrational or extremely biased thought patterns that will make your target doubt themselves. This technique may seem similar to gaslighting, but it is a bit different. There are several types of cognitive distortion techniques that you can use, including catastrophizing. This tactic is all about implanting the thought of complete catastrophe in the head of your target. This happens when you make them think that even a little mistake will cause a domino effect, leading to complete disaster. With catastrophizing, the target will most likely feel scared and walk on eggshells most of the time. Personalization. In this technique, you will put the blame on the target for an incident they have no control over. For instance, you tell your target that the reason a mutual acquaintance of yours is in such a bad mood or feels distressed is because of something that the target did. You will have to frame this accusation using fake sincerity and concern to make it more believable and also for your target to become defensive against you. Mind reading. This is not mind reading in the literal term. This is just assuming that you know what your target is thinking of, but without showing any evidence to support your claim. You will have to make your message quite vague so that your target will eventually cave and prattle possible reasons why you think that way. Overgeneralization. This involves making your target draw broad and general conclusions. Let's say that your target failed to accomplish a certain task. In this case, you may start persuading them or making them believe that doing their best will only cause them to waste their time and effort. This will make the target doubt their abilities, making them less self-confident and more susceptible to even more manipulation and persuasion. All or nothing. In this tactic, you will have to limit the possible outcomes that your target can hope for. A simple and somewhat innocent way of using this is when you want to choose the restaurant for your date. You can ask your partner whether they want to eat chicken or fish. This makes it seem like the target has a choice in the matter, but the truth is, you already limited the choices to those that you want. These techniques are designed to muddle the thoughts of your target by overloading their minds with too much information in rapid-fire succession. Location advantage. Do you want to get the upper hand in any situation? Then ensure that you work on making your target go out of their comfort zone. This will disorient your target, making them drop any mental defenses that they might have put up against you. This technique is useful if you are planning to go on a date and you want to leave a good impression. In this case, you need to do something new, like bring them to a nice place that is new to them. It should be a place or activity that is significantly different from the ones they are familiar with. For instance, if the person typically likes going to different clubs, take them somewhere quiet and intimate. This radical change in environment will confuse your target, and maybe even make them a bit scared. So look for signs of these emotions. If such signs of distress become visible and noticeable, it is safe to say that you were able to break down their defenses. In other words, you can begin exerting your control over them. Emotional manipulation. This is a collection of different techniques that will let you play with your target's emotions. When it comes to emotional manipulation, you will have to expose your target to a lot of emotional abuse, leading to their inability to think for themselves. Some emotional manipulation tactics include guilt tripping. This involves making the target feel responsible for your actions. For instance, say you bought a car, and your partner confronts you for making such a huge purchase without consulting them. You can rebut by saying that the reason why you bought the car is that you have been feeling stressed out at home because of your partner's constant nagging. Tell your partner that it is the only thing that makes you happy right now, but it is on the verge of being taken away from you. Love bombing. This is when you overwhelm your victim with so much attention, affection, and love in an attempt to make them unable to deny whatever request you may have. It resembles guilt-tripping a bit, but it does not require you to say anything. The only important thing is to try to be the best partner. That way, once you ask for something from them anytime soon, they will feel compelled to honor your request as a means of giving back the favor they received from you. Stonewalling. This is sort of like the opposite of love bombing because you will be completely refusing to communicate or engage in any way with your target. This is similar to passive aggression, but you are not even answering the target even if they ask you directly if there is anything wrong. You can combine this technique with love bombing for an even heavier hit. You would love bomb the target for a couple of weeks and they suddenly stop talking and interacting. Predicting behavior based on body language and nonverbal cues. One way you can somewhat make your manipulation attacks a bit more effective is to predict what your target will be doing and then act before they can continue with their plan. A good way to predict your target's next move is by observing their body language. People are more driven by their emotions and not by logical thinking. You can use this to your advantage as you already know how to read people's body language. Let's say that someone you have been manipulating for a while suddenly shows signs of clarity. The signs you should look for are anger and surprise. When you have taken note of the emotions brewing inside your target, you need to do something to quell the said emotions so you can take back the reins. Another way to predict your target's next move is to check their actual body language. For instance, you are talking with another person, and they are showing signs of boredom and disinterest. To prevent the person from leaving, you can start using assertive body language and lighten up the conversation to create more interest in your projects. Building resistance against dark psychological tactics. Now that you've learned how to use dark psychology for manipulation and persuasion purposes, it is time to understand how to protect yourself from it. You would not be much of a dark psychology user if the same techniques that you learned can also be used on you quite easily. Here, you will discover ways to detect potential threats immediately and the techniques that will help you turn the tides in your favor. Why should you protect yourself? Dark psychology attacks can leave lasting negative effects on the victims. Note that even if you have some knowledge on dark psychology and how to use it, it will not cause you to be immune to it. Here are some potential damages that you can sustain from dark psychology attacks. Psychological damage. The most obvious effect of dark psychology is psychological harm. As you can see, most of those who are victimized by manipulation and other tactics that abuse them developed mental conditions. Some examples are anxiety, depression, PTSD, and other forms of mental trauma. This psychological damage has lasting effects. If left untreated, there is a high chance for the damage to become permanent. Social divide. Many also use dark psychology to divide people and create conflict. A single manipulative person can cause enough disruption inside a sizable group of people to break them into as many factions as they want. The manipulator would play with the members' emotions, behaviors, and beliefs. They can create a polarized, intolerant, and sometimes even violent environment. Trust issues. Using dark psychology can ruin one's ability to trust another human being again. Some manipulation victims felt so traumatized that they ended up developing trust issues. This leads them to become basically recluses who no longer want to be part of any society. The negative effects of dark psychology can be quite brutal and can affect more harm than just one individual. This makes it necessary to be extra vigilant all the time. Keep an eye out for manipulators and the dark tactics they use. Note, though, that this should not also be a reason for you to doubt all people you meet and interact with. Make it a point to treat other people with respect, empathy, and dignity, You just have to start becoming more skeptical if you notice warning signs that you are in front of a manipulative person. Identifying the aggressor through their body language. You should identify who among the many different people you interact with daily could be a potential manipulator, which can be quite difficult. Most of them already know how to mask their emotions and intent. You can only pray that you don't run into those guys. However, there is a set of characteristics called the dark triad that chronic manipulators have. Here are the personality traits comprising the dark triad. Narcissism. Of the 3 traits in the dark triad, narcissism is actually the most difficult to find. One misconception about those who have narcissistic behaviors is that they are selfish. Note, though, that this is not the only indicator, as a lot of people, regardless if they are narcissistic or not, have the tendency to become selfish at certain times, too. This means that actual narcissism goes beyond selfishness and self-centeredness. A narcissist's only concern is about themselves. Even though all people would put themselves first occasionally, a narcissist would do this to the extreme. A narcissist would put their own needs at the forefront of every chance they can get. Typical narcissistic behavior makes them quite unable to form and maintain meaningful relationships with other people. The primary reason is that building a relationship involves taking into consideration what the other feels and needs. This is something that narcissists find so difficult to do. Subclinical psychopathy. Before we delve into what subclinical psychopathy is, let's first discuss what psychopathy is. A true psychopath is someone who has extreme antisocial behavior. These people are unable to feel empathy or remorse, but they would eventually learn how to fake these emotions quite well. In addition, a psychopath would also have a dampened and, in certain cases, no impulse control. This is the reason why they do not have any second thoughts telling people what's on their minds, no matter who hears it. These qualities are not just one-off occurrences that you can just shrug off. For a true narcissist, not having empathy and not being able to show remorse is a rule. They simply do not care. Psychopathy and subclinical psychopathy have more similarities than what most actually imagine and believe. It was even confirmed by several psychiatric researchers that the two only have a few differences. This means that a true psychopath and a subclinical psychopath would behave almost the same way. The difference between the two types of psychopathy is quantitative. A subclinical psychopath would display the same behavioral characteristics, but the effects that these have on their lives are not quite as extreme. The reason is they do not display their psychopathic behavior quite as often and as extreme. Machiavellianism. As the name suggests, Machiavellianism is a personality type that incorporates the idealisms of Niccolo Machiavelli, a Renaissance philosopher who authored the book The Prince. One of the main themes in the book is that the end naturally justifies the means, and that is the theme wherein people with Machiavellianism live their lives. People who have a Machiavellian personality are highly likely to become manipulative. Society views people with this personality as chronic liars, but their deceptiveness is much deeper than just simple lies. According to the Prince, a true Machiavellian knows how important it is to appear forthcoming while using deceptive means to get their desired outcomes. How to identify people with the dark triad traits. It can be quite a challenge for an untrained person to identify those who have dark triad personalities. They are so deceptive that they are typically charismatic and charming, too. They are masters at building rapport and can charm the pants off anyone they want to. If an expert manipulator is close to you, it will immediately make you feel like you are with someone whose intelligence, taste, and compassion is on a superior and high level. However, as good as they may be at deception, those with dark triad personalities cannot sustain this kind of perception forever. As mentioned in an earlier chapter, people cannot be manipulated into totally brainwashed servants. Eventually, the victims of deception will start feeling burnt out and will free themselves from the hold of the manipulator. Instead of suffering under a person with a dark triad personality, though, it would be infinitely better to avoid them at all costs. To prevent yourself from being victimized by them, be more vigilant and watch out for the following behaviors. Difficulty in sustaining relationships. Those with dark triad personalities are incapable of maintaining any kind of relationship. Note that this does not just encompass romantic relationships. Dark triad personalities seem to have no friends, and their coworkers tend to distance themselves from them too. Even their own families cannot stand their manipulative behavior, and many of them have been disowned. Dark triad people typically have a long list of failed relationships. They claim to have cut off a lot of people from their lives. The truth, though, is that they alienated themselves away from everyone that they have ever been in contact with. They play the victim card their entire lives. Dark triad personalities are also famous for being masters when it comes to gaslighting and implementing the narcissistic cycle of abuse. Once people call them out, they often put the blame on others, claiming that they are the actual victims. According to psychological experts, whenever a person with a dark triad personality gets triggered, they usually show rage and do acts of violence. It is also very easy to trigger them. In most cases, it is when they feel like there is a threat on their self-esteem and they are at a risk of getting abandoned. Their stories are always inconsistent. Even though people with dark triad traits are naturally talented when fabricating and manipulating information to suit their own interests, they cannot sustain it indefinitely. Putting up the perfect veneer takes a lot of effort and energy, and as time passes, they will start to get tired and mess up their stories. They would get their facts and other details of their stories mixed up and not add up. They would even make lame excuses for why they made mistakes. Seems like they have a chronic need to fulfill. One who has dark triad traits always seems to have a constant need to fulfill something, even at the expense of those around them. Despite being the ones doing the manipulation, they always feel like they are the victim. They are never satisfied with whatever they have. If you are with a dark triad personality, you will feel constantly tired physically, financially, and emotionally. Dark triad personalities are like energy vampires. They suck the energy and will to live off the people within their range. Using NLP to turn the tables against your attacker. Once you realize that a manipulator is approaching you and trying to victimize you, do not panic. Remember that there are ways to protect yourself and turn the tides in your favor. Get rid of the person's motives. Manipulative people usually exploit certain situations in order to get their claws into others. For instance, they would do something nice for you one day so that you will feel compelled to return the favor someday. For instance, they would help you find a job, give you a small token or gift, and then would come back to you later in order to have you repay your debt. Do not give the manipulative person any motives that they can use against you. If they are giving you a gift, return it. If they say they will help you with your tasks, decline the offer and finish your work on your own. You will feel better that you don't owe anyone anything. If you don't have even an inkling of a motive, the manipulative person does not have an opening. Shift the focus to the manipulator. The last thing that a manipulative person expects is for their target to retaliate almost immediately. If a manipulator approaches you, ask them a couple of simple questions to throw off their concentration, such as the following. Will you really accept my opinion? Or are you just asking for the sake of asking? Are you really expecting me to do this for you? You know that I won't be getting anything out of this, right? If I decide on something, will you be able to accept whatever I say even if it contradicts your ideas? Do you have a coworker who likes to delegate their work to others so they can lighten their workload? If they ask for a favor again, you also have to ask in return if you can also delegate your work to them soon. These kinds of questions put the manipulative person on the spot and throw off their concentration. This can probably make them go away, too. Use the manipulator's name often. The famous book by Dale Carnegie, entitled How to Win Friends and Influence People, states how important it is to use a person's name during conversations. This method improves your understanding, and to make it even more effective, use the form of the person's name that they liked the most. When you use their name rather often, they would feel close to you. If the manipulator is not that insidious, hearing their name will still have a positive effect on them. In addition, they might not go through with the manipulation. Do not break eye contact. Just like the previous tips, the point of this technique is to make the manipulative person lose their focus and concentration. When the manipulator approaches you and asks you for something, just say no sternly. Of course, this will not be enough for a manipulator, so when they ask again, look them in the eye and say no again. Do not break eye contact. A manipulator will try to bring down your defenses by reciprocating your gaze, but you can turn this back on them by making it a staring contest. Do not break eye contact with a manipulator to make them uncomfortable and lose focus on what they are doing. The awkwardness they feel may cause them to think twice about approaching and victimizing you once again. Keep them from generalizing. One of the basic strategies employed by a manipulative person is to take something specific and then take it massively out of context. After that, they will use it as an example of your usual behavior. The manipulator does this to shame you into submission. For instance, your spouse is angry because you forgot to take the trash out one time and then you were getting an earful about how you were always doing this. This is even though you just forgot to do it this one time as far as you can remember. However, your spouse continues to say that you always bow out when it comes to doing chores. To counter this kind of manipulation, you can ask the manipulator for examples of the other instances when you last made this discretion. For instance, you can say, "Maybe you're right. Can you refresh my memory of the last couple of times that I recently made this mistake?" Odds are, they will not be able to give you an honest answer, making them the potential manipulator to back off. Repeat your answer as needed. A broken record can be quite annoying, so use this same principle on a potential manipulator. Note that they absolutely hate hearing the same words repeatedly, particularly if it is an answer they did not like to hear. If they continue to pester and pressure you so you will grant their demands, provide them with a repetitive response. Make sure that you are saying your reply phrase using a monotonous tone. Strip your voice of all emotions and say it repeatedly until the other person gives up. Your universal response should sound like you do not care at all. Here is a sample exchange where you can apply this technique. "I thought we had an understanding." Let's stop discussing this. "Can you even hear me? Did you even understand what I said?" Let's stop discussing this. "Are you just stupid? Or are you just not even trying to understand what I said?" Let's stop discussing this. Distract yourself and do your best to relax. Here is another way for you to protect yourself against manipulation. Distract yourself so you will not even hear the manipulator. A good trick you can always try is as follows. Imagine that the person who is trying to manipulate you is inside a fish tank with thick glass walls and no sound can go through it. You will only see the other person's lips moving, but you cannot hear any sound coming from their mouth. Distance yourself physically. One more technique that a manipulator can use to make their target uncomfortable and easier to manipulate is to get right up in their face. They would intentionally violate their victim's personal space. To counter this method, just create a space between you and the manipulator. This should give you enough space so you can think properly and defend yourself more effectively. You can also stay away from them by telling them right away that you are busy and you have no time to accommodate them. Defending yourself against manipulation may seem easy, but you should avoid assuming that you can always protect yourself all the time. Trust your gut always. Once you realize that someone is manipulating you, put up your defenses right away. Be proactive, too, by thinking of your next steps. Avoid being complacent. Otherwise, you will become even more vulnerable to manipulation. The dangers of being a dark psychology user. Dark psychology may affect its targets more, but it can also cause severe harm to whoever is using this questionable approach to influence people. If you are a beginner, it is highly suggested to try other techniques first before delving into this insidious side of influence. You need to know what kind of dangers you will be subjecting yourself to when you start reading the mind and the body language of those around you through dark psychology manipulation tactics. If you learned about these dangers and you are okay with what could possibly happen, you are free to practice your skills. Why do people resort to using dark psychology? You may have your own set of reasons for why you are considering learning about and using dark psychology. However, others may not share your reasons. Even though there are certain risks to using dark psychology techniques, there are also reasons why people are somewhat compelled to use them, especially when it comes to decoding body language. These include: they want power. Dark psychology has tactics designed to manipulate and control others. This can provide you with a sense of power and control over them. For some, having power over others is more than enough reason to practice dark psychology, especially those with psychotic tendencies. Those with psychotic tendencies just want to see others behave like their puppets, and not necessarily because they want to achieve anything. They want something another person has. You can also use dark psychology if another person has something that you covet and you want to get it without resorting to outright stealing. Some insidious people would either persuade or downright manipulate others to get as much out of them as they possibly can. Typically, this is used by unscrupulous people who want to separate people from their wallets. You will usually find that those who run Ponzi schemes are typically using dark psychology techniques. Oftentimes, they convince people to invest money in their get-rich-quick schemes through gaslighting and emotional manipulation. Once they have gotten their victims' money, they would disappear into thin air. As mentioned earlier, the people who usually have no qualms about using dark psychology are those who have the dark triad personality traits. In other words, they keep on doing what they want without caring about its effects on the victims. They wish to gain control. Manipulative people also have narcissistic tendencies, which means that they put themselves over others. This kind of thinking usually means that manipulative people are unable to commit to a long-term relationship, though they also like the intimacy that usually comes with it. Some of them are only therefore after sex, which they often get by manipulating their partners to receive their sexual advances positively. Sometimes the manipulation tactics can be borderline sexual abuse. However, the victim has already been conditioned to be more open to their manipulator's advances. Although using manipulation for sex can also be regarded as sexual assault, the manipulator can use other dark psychology techniques to gaslight or emotionally manipulate their victims into thinking that they did nothing wrong. There is also a high chance that they will blame the victim instead. Effects of dark psychology on the user. As useful as dark psychology is, it comes with a set of risks for the user. Yes, these techniques tend to do significant damage to the target, but they can also affect the user negatively. Here's how. Erodes one's trustworthiness. Using deception and manipulation won't exactly gain you a lot of friends. It's quite the opposite, really. Despite being successful in manipulating someone to do what you want, this does not mean they liked and appreciated you for it. Regardless if you can argue that your use of deceptive means led to mutually beneficial effects, the fact remains that you used another person as a tool. Even if you don't have Machiavellian tendencies or you may just be ignorant of the fact, the end will never justify the means. The person you manipulated will always have a sense of distrust in you, and they will probably tell the others about what you did. Makes you untrustworthy, too. The more you use dark psychology to read other people's body language and behavior, the more you will think that those around you are also inherently evil. This will even get worse if you let your biases get the best of you, because then you will only see the evil in every person you encounter. You may become a neurotic mess who suspects everyone, even your loved ones, all the time. This results in you alienating yourself from them. This condition is also likely to get worse, causing you to develop other mental health problems, such as anxiety and depression. Some even develop schizophrenia. Skews one's moral compass. This means that even if you are fully aware that your deeds are inherently wrong, you still end up finding excuses for your actions. The reason is that humans naturally have this tendency to justify their actions even if those are wrong. They would forgive themselves for their transgressions as long as they benefit from them. You naturally believe that you are a moral and upstanding person. However, after you introduce yourself to dark psychology and practice it, you will realize that your morality will be put to the test. The more you use dark psychology, the more it will chip away at your morality. Do it long enough without checking yourself, and you will no longer see the dark side of these methods. Get you into legal troubles. Forcing someone to do something has legal repercussions. For instance, if you use dark psychology in dating, like when you manipulate a person to go to bed with you, the other person can still press charges in case they feel like you violated them, even if it is borderline legal. Even if you end up escaping the lawsuit, just the fact that you will be summoned to a courtroom multiple times will cost a lot of money and waste plenty of your time. You also have to be careful when using dark psychology in business practices. Getting another person to sign a financial contract under coercion can sometimes nullify the legality of the agreement, as one can argue that it was done under false pretenses. You may find a way out of it, but it usually involves exorbitant fees. If you could not talk your way out of the lawsuit, you will be seeing some jail time. Lead you toward a life of crime. There are also severe cases when your constant use of dark psychology may turn you into a full-blown criminal. This may happen if your narcissism and Machiavellianism worsens. In that case, you may no longer view people as human beings. You will even begin to look at them as being inferior to you. In other words, you believe that the only person who matters is you, while the others are dispensable. When this happens and you develop a full-blown mental illness, you may not even second-guess murdering someone just to get your desired results. Your illusions of grandeur will be so significant, causing you to forget that you have to follow laws. You can avoid this if you were able to receive psychiatric help before even reaching this point. How to keep your morals in check when using dark psychology. At its core, dark psychology is a tool used for insidious purposes. However, is there a way to use these techniques without falling into the dark side? Is there a way to use dark psychology in an ethical manner? Can you really use this and not become corrupted with power? Yes, there is a way for you to still remain somewhat ethical when using dark psychology in things, like reading body language and manipulation. There are several ways to ensure that your morals are still intact while using rather dark techniques. Have a clear purpose. One way to retain your morals, even when using dark tools, is to set a clear purpose and develop a set of values to help guide your actions. Having a purpose will help keep you grounded and somewhat prevent you from going too far. In addition, it also helps if you choose to use dark psychology to benefit another without encroaching too much into their personal space. For instance, you can use dark psychology tactics to persuade a friend to stop smoking or help your spouse overcome fears. You should also make sure that you set clear boundaries to avoid causing harm to your target or hurting them unnecessarily. Ask consent if possible. Although dark psychology typically relies on discretion and secrecy, if you want to be somewhat ethical, then you have to inform the person about what you will be doing. Let's say that you are helping a loved one recover from a mental trauma or addiction. Before doing anything, explain the process that you will be putting them through. You don't need to go through the specifics, but you should at least tell them what kinds of results you are going for. This way, the other will not feel violated and you will be able to help. Be aware of the potential harm you will be doing. You can also keep your morality intact even if you are a dark psychology user if you constantly remind yourself of the risks and consequences associated with it. Avoid using it without thinking of its negative effects on your target. Also, you should be prepared for any possible backlash that might come from you using dark psychology techniques. If you ever get caught using these techniques, you should be accountable and admit your sins. Lying, denying, and not being responsible will only drag you deeper into the dark triad of behavioral traits. Balance it with empathy and compassion. You can also keep your moral compass pointing in the right direction even when you are using dark psychology tactics and invading a person by reading their body language if you balance it with compassion and empathy. Remember that you will be using it with another human, someone who also has real feelings. This means you have to treat each interaction with them with kindness and respect. Even though you can use dark psychology to manipulate a person using their vulnerabilities, that does not mean you should, at least not all the time. Never lose sight of the human aspect whenever you are interacting with others. Avoid treating and perceiving them as tools that you can use to accomplish your desires. Constantly question your motives. Learn and understand what you intend to do and the reason or purpose behind it. You should always question your motives for using dark psychology. Make sure that you can give yourself a reasonable answer. If you find that you are moving the goalposts just so you can justify your reason, you have to rein yourself in. Not doing so will give you a reason to do more insidious things. Be responsible enough to check yourself every now and then, since the only one who can do that for you is yourself. The main reason is that you will most likely be using dangerous manipulation tactics to weasel yourself out of the confrontation. While dark psychology is a powerful tool, it can corrupt you easily if you use it carelessly. Be extra careful when using this technique for reading body language and manipulating and persuading others to avoid seeing yourself falling off the deep end. Conclusion. Now that you've finished reading this book, you have surely gathered information about body language reading and the concepts and techniques behind it. You have also learned how to use this new skill to influence and manipulate people. As a beginner, it is crucial to practice regularly so you can master this powerful and useful skill. With enough time and commitment to practice, you will find yourself reading other people without even thinking about it. Hopefully, this book has enlightened you with everything related to reading and decoding body language. Especially with the help of proven techniques like NLP and dark psychology. You are now aware of how to use these techniques in conjunction with body language to persuade and manipulate others. Just remember that while reading body language is an important tool you can use to make your life much easier, it is still crucial to proceed to use it with caution. Be responsible and careful when using body language reading techniques so you won't end up harming yourself and those around you. Good luck.
We appreciate you tuning in to one of our captivating audiobooks. For more immersive experiences, here is another audiobook we're certain you'll enjoy. Don't forget to show your support by liking this video, sharing what you loved about this audiobook in the comments section below, and subscribing for more captivating audiobooks like this. Thanks for being a part of our audiobook community.